So during the living with autonomy checklist, you'll see that the first one is the nutrition side of things, where we're looking at how to be more inclusive with foods, how to get more familiar and get yourself into a mindset where it's inclusive rather than exclusive as you move out of that dieting phase. A long-term solution to nutrition is spending a brief period of time tracking your food intake, utilizing something like an app. Now, during the fat loss phase, we will be promoting you utilizing the swap section and the process and methodology that we have as per the framework. And if you get through that diet and you get through the methodology of that phase, trial and improvement, and get to that physical goal without having to need to utilize any tracking aspects, or you've utilized like hand portions in meals out, and you've utilized menus and looking at menus and choices, and then you've also utilized the swaps on a frequent basis to find what was the right for you at that moment in time, and you've done that chronologically over the weeks, you'll get to a point of where you will want to be more inclusive with different food sources. Now, the easiest way to keep on top of that is by tracking your food intake, utilizing an app. It's a long-term approach. You know, if you want to find out how many calories are in certain things that are in the groceries, sure, you can read the back of the packet, but how does that attain or move through or even relate to the rest of your day based on these numbers that you've got? From a principle perspective, you are going to need to manage your calories over the long term. That will keep you in either moving towards growing muscle tissue, so increasing your body weight, or it will keep you in that select area that you want to stay within, that either the 0 to 4 kilos, you find a body weight range that you really enjoy, that you feel great on, that you look great, and have that balance with. You'll have a number of calories based on your activity, based on your body weight, what it takes to stay there. It'll be in a rough range of maintenance. Your goal over the long term is to stay within those ranges and choose when it is right to move up or move down in terms of your calorie allowance. But for now, you'll want to do that, and the best way to do that is during this living with autonomy phase is to find the tracking method that is right for you, find the easiest way to do that, and practice it. So practicing utilizing MyFitnessPal as an example will give you that edge to be able to be more inclusive, but know that you're not going to go over your calorie allowance when you're trying new foods. It gives you the ability to build on top of your routines and your structures that you already have. You know when you're cooking, you know when you're preparing stuff, you know how the week goes for the most part. You just have to now look at the food intake that you're having and match that to the allowance that you have. Now, this is not forever, and you do not need to. There's another video in this portal around about how you can move away from tracking food intake, and you can go to more eyeballing and portion sizes if that is what you choose to do. But if you choose to continue utilizing tracking, getting better with this MyFitnessPal is going to be essential. We know, and this is why we do not advise it straight away with MyFitnessPal, is that there is a tracking accuracy error from the human that is utilizing it. We know that sometimes 100 grams may not be 100 grams that you put down because you might not weigh the foods. 1 tablespoon or 1 teaspoon that is a measure in MyFitnessPal may be a heat teaspoon or a tablespoon, and therefore the accuracies tend to be something that you learn to get better with. We know that if you don't do the accuracy or the tracking element on that specific day, if you're recalling it from 2 days afterwards, you have a higher likelihood that you will miss things out. The sauce that you added, the little bit that you had before bed, you know, the things that you didn't really think about that you ate, but you did. So getting into the familiar aspects of, if you're going to track, then being in that, either that motive of, I'm going to track it before I eat, or I'm going to have a kind of a set plan in my head that I'm going to utilize, and if I want to move away from that, I can then track foods in and out before I eat it as the main mechanism. We know that people are going to guesstimate. If you're guesstimating your food intake whilst tracking, you then have this room for error that is going to be massive. About 20 to 40% over where you think it is. So for most part, for the research, someone will say, I eat 2,000 calories a day, and then when they actually track it, it turns out to be 20 to 40% over that allowance, which is largely vast for those that are wanting to stay within a calorie allowance, because that won't happen. So getting used to MyFitnessPal and the tracking element is a skill within itself. And this is why we do not recommend it from the beginning. That's where the swaps are there for you to get accustomed to swapping foods out very easily, for you to have no thought process, no decision making. But when you do come into this area of trying to live with autonomy, you are going to need to take control and probably spend a little bit more time making the decisions that you weren't making before. because there's the goal that is different now. You have to utilize something that is going to be there for the future. You know, autonomy is not going to be there for you for the rest of your life to make the decisions around food intake. So you have to get accustomed to it with a mode, a medium to be able to serve your needs. So that's the skill element. Then from a food perspective, I wouldn't recommend doing it during your fat loss phase or your trial improvement phase, just simply because of all those skill errors that are trying to be learned. Always take time, and you don't really want to spend in a diet more than you have to. You know, if you spend 3 weeks getting accustomed to MyFitnessPal, you go over every single week, you get no results. You're spending 3 more weeks in a deficit or a diet or a perceived diet that will take away its toll mentally over the long term. And we want to make sure that dieting is one of those where, whilst you will go at your own rate, it's done at the best rate that you can do, so that you can move out of it as soon as possible, so you can give yourself a lifestyle, eat more calories, give yourself a better day-to-day process. But the thing with MyFitnessPal is that because you can track foods in and out on a day-to-day basis, it gives you no structure, it gives you no routine, it gives you no non-negotiables. So if you haven't formed non-negotiables yet, it's very, very hard to stay adherent. It's very, very hard to stay accountable, because you can just go into MyFitnessPal, swap out this food, add this food. It may not even be right, but you can swap it in and out, and you can change your meal timings, you can change your food sources, all of this stuff, which doesn't really give you a really solid foundation. We know that the foundations of any type of task-driven orientation, you know, for you to perform something over and over again, be consistent, is going to need to be, you need to be good with time management, you need to be good with reducing decisions, and you need to have a routine and a structure to work off that have non-negotiable elements for you to get the things that you need to get done, which then make boundaries. And these are going to be really important things, and you don't get that if you utilize something like MyFitnessPal at the beginning, because the boundaries are not placed. If you have a meal plan, or you have some type of structured format, you have timings of meals, you have the non-negotiability of this is what you're eating at this time, and forcing yourself to do those things where you are being more disciplined, you are creating non-negotiables, you're creating structure through your food intake, is giving you this underlying principle of making, you know, your day successful by creating boundaries, a reason to create boundaries, a reason to be better with your time management, a reason to be more organized and structured. And once you have that barrier, and once you have these players at a foundational level, you will be able to, after that, go into utilizing MyFitnessPal or a tracking app, or even not tracking at all. When you do move into whichever way you want to, you then become a layer up. You don't just struggle with these foundational layers. They will stay principles, and they will stay throughout. The best people that are managing their day-to-day, even just in work, in business, in life, are being proactive about that day. They're being more structured, they're being more routine. Now, they're not down to the minute, but they are, you know, knowing what is going on within their calendar. They're well in control of their time management. So we want to make sure that we have this as our main contributing factor to our days, to our weeks, and what's going on in our lives. And once you get that, you can then move into tracking from MyFitnessPal. And once you do that, you can then build on top of those foundational layers. You have boundaries, you have non-negotiables, you have better time management, you have better structure and routine already in place. So then when you just add food variety on top, all you have to get used to is utilizing a tracking app to be more skillful at it, and then utilize different food sources within that tracking app. And if you do it in that layer, and you do it in that order, you should never have that many issues when it comes to dieting again in the future, or even just being consistent over the long term. Because the first thing that goes is that bottom foundational layer, time management, structure, and boundaries. You know, when things get busy, people stay on their phones longer, don't say no to stopping work and going into the training sessions, or prepping their food or whatever. So you will be more successful if you create that layer first from a psychological trait perspective. And once you create that psychological level, you can build on that from a nutrition perspective. So that's why we don't use MyFitnessPal in the beginning, and that's what the goals are for when you move into that living with autonomy phase. You will have the ability to add choice on top of that, and a tracking method to do so. Below, you will find a guide on how to use MyFitnessPal for the most part, which if you are ready to utilize, which you'll check with your coach, it'll be there for you to help navigate that new intricacy, that new skill that you're trying to develop, which is obviously nutrition tracking.